Okay, welcome everyone to a quick meeting on the inland port here in Utah. We have Theresa Foxley from EDCUtah, Jack Hedge from the Inland Port Authority, and Devin Belnap from Riverbend Management. Excited to have a quick conversation about the inland port and all that's happening in that regard in the Northwest Quadrant. So without further ado, I think we'll just get started. And Theresa, maybe we could ask you, what is an inland port? Why do we have one here in Utah, and how is it going to affect the average person?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on today, Jeremy and Michael. I really appreciate the invitation. It's great to be joined by Jack and Darren, two gentlemen who I really respect and enjoy the opportunity to work with along with you two. So inland port, what is it? $1 million question. It's been something that our community's been thinking about a lot, not just for the last 2 years, but really for the last 30. So we know in this global economy that goods move through different modalities, but that in some instances, particularly along our deep water ports, that we have an opportunity to create partnerships with these deep water ports to move goods more efficiently in and out of our market. Why would we want to do this as a community? One, it solidifies our position in the global supply chain. Two, it allows us to really get the holy grail of economic development, and that's the backhaul. So creating opportunities for our exporters to be able to get their goods out into global markets. Why are we so focused on exports? It really is, what somebody once told me this, and I thought it was kind of clever. When you're exporting goods or services out of your community, you're importing money. And so that really is what we want to do in economic development. So Jack will talk a lot more about the functions and the logistics of an inland port and the authority, but it really is it's a real estate play, it's an authority, it's a partnership with local, state, federal government so that we can move goods in and out of the state of Utah more efficiently by the modalities that exist within Utah today and that will exist as this port develops. So I've called the inland port Utah's 4-3-2-1 opportunity. We have a $4 billion airport reconstruction. We have connections to 3 of the deep water ports on the West Coast. We have we have I-15 and I-80, so 2 interstate highways connecting here, and it's the one spot in the world where it happens. So that to me is what the inland port is.
Boy, you must have thought about that 4-3-2-1 all night. That was really well said. That's even quicker than an elevator pitch. Good job, Theresa.
Thanks, Jeremy. Just trying to get it down, Jeremy and Michael.
Yeah, really great. Jack, I know you've got really deep knowledge and background in ports, and with your background in LA, wondered if you could just give us a quick summary of your background and how that might influence the development here and what your thoughts are, given that background.
Sure, Jeremy. Thanks. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group and be on this panel with Theresa and David. It's a great opportunity, and I appreciate it. And Theresa, I'm going to steal that 4-3-2-1 line. I want to use that. That's a good one.
We call that R&D, rip off and deploy. Go for it.
That's right. But yeah, coming from the Port of Los Angeles, I mean, we're the largest container port in North America. Did about 9 million TEUs last year. Our sister port, Port of Long Beach, did about 7.5 million TEUs. And combined, we did about 30% of the trans-Pacific containerized trade in the United States. So it's a massive gateway for the entire economy of the United States. And all the West Coast ports put together, about half of the U.S. Economy, import-export economy, flows through those 3 major gateways. So understanding where we fit in that supply chain is really valuable and really important. And I think Theresa hit the nail on the head. We are the only location that I'm aware of in the world that has those deep connections to those ports. And in addition, we're about halfway between those ports and Chicago, which is the largest distribution market hub in North America. So we really are in a very unique position globally in terms of that ability. We are well positioned, and what is happening at those ports is, frankly, they're running out of land. And as the population continues to grow, as the U.S. economy grows, we will continue to import and export more goods. We are a global economy. It is that simple. And as those ports become more and more congested and more constrained on land, the ability to move goods more efficiently, more effectively, increase the velocity of those ports, those seaports, becomes critical. And we are uniquely positioned to support all three gateways in that regard and move those goods more efficiently, move them more critically, and frankly, support the growth, the economic growth of the entire country by doing that. I don't know of any other place in the United States or in the world that has that kind of positioning as it lies. And I think that's one of the real benefits of being here and one of the things that we really can capitalize on.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, recently we've experienced this pandemic, this terrible COVID-19, and has that influenced anything with your thoughts in regards to the inland port, either Theresa or Jack? Maybe we start with Theresa and see if Jack has any thoughts about that.
Well, it certainly has, Jeremy. I think very few of us realize the fragility of the supply chain. And there were a number of weaknesses exposed through the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, thankfully here in Utah, we by and large have been able to get the medical supplies that we've needed. We've been able to keep our stores shelves stocked, but we've been able to pump gas in our cars and the heat and the electricity has stayed on. But in other parts of the world, we have seen some real weaknesses in the supply chain. And we know that corporations will be thinking a lot about risk management and about redundancy building. And in fact, Jeremy, you're the first person who told me this phrase that, there's an expectation that the supply chain might move from what has been called just-in-time management to just-in-case management. So building in some redundancy and some additional resiliency into the supply chain. We also know there's a huge interest by national and state leaders to create additional resiliency in what we would call critical industries, including medical supply chains. And so we believe there might be an opportunity not to reshore completely, but to add parts of the medical supply chain back into the United States. So I have very much been thinking of the inland port as somewhat of an extension of the terrific economic activity that's already going on in this inland port jurisdictional authority. We've been thinking about it in terms of large advanced manufacturing that again could take advantage of this backhaul. We've been thinking of it in terms of getting goods into people here along the Intermountain West. But I'm thinking about it a lot more now in terms of positioning for some of this, again, what I've called the 3 R's, resiliency, redundancy, and reshoring. And I think, again, if the inland port was a great opportunity 6 months ago, it's an even better opportunity today as our national attention is more focused on these issues.
Yeah, Theresa, I think you're right. In fact, I'll take it a step further. I think it's critical. I think the inland port becomes a critical piece of rebuilding our economy here in the U.S., but also our long-term economic growth for the very things that you've mentioned. This pandemic has shown just how fragile our supply chains, the way they were structured, are. Being long, being very narrow, being sort of single trade lane supply chains put us at a lot of risk economically. And frankly, it put lives at risk. It is, I think, we have a unique opportunity now in this country to really rethink and use our supply chains to make us more competitive, to keep us more competitive in the global economy going forward. And a location like Utah provides a platform for companies to look at a place to centralize production or bring manufacturing and consolidate manufacturing and consolidate their distribution networks and their supply chains as a way to give themselves more flexibility in their supply chains because we're linked to multiple seaport gateways, give themselves more opportunities, more disperse their supply chains, and give themselves more opportunities to bring in things from different areas. It gives them a good location because of the backhaul potential and the other facilities that exist in the state to disperse their products into the distribution markets, the distribution channels that they have, it really gives a strong platform to do that. Supply chain and distribution channels are a critical piece of any manufacturer's, any producer's risk management assessment, risk management program. And it's not just from a cost basis, but just from an overall risk basis. Utah really provides a unique opportunity, and the Inland Port Authority, working with other partners like EDCUtah, really provides a unique opportunity to give manufacturers and producers a way to, I heard it used the other day, weaponize their supply chains. Use their supply chains in a very competitive manner, really dig in and understand what their supply chains and their distribution networks need. Utah gives them a place to do that.
That's great.
Let me tag on to that. I just want to talk about maybe the naysayers a little bit. There's a lot of, well, I don't know how much there really is, but we do see, every once in a while I see a bumper sticker that says recall the inland port. And I don't really know where those folks are coming from. I know some of the concerns have been about increases in population and suburban development and sprawl. And I think all three of you can take this. Devin, too, it'd be good to hear from you. What do you guys think about the inland port and what's happening in the Northwest Quadrant causing sprawl, or is it maybe centralizing growth? Is it actually allowing us to be more focused? And what about pollution and sustainability issues that people seem to be concerned about with the port?
Well, I think that as real estate developers and city planners, we should always be focused on that. And I see, I think Utah and Wasatch Front does an excellent job in expanding their light rail facilities, even beyond where they're probably even needed. If you go out to like Harriman City, you're already seeing the extent of the light rail, and you're seeing those lines getting built out west to the inland port. And so I think that they do a really good job of managing traffic and people. And I just think from a city planning perspective and zoning, I think, and as builders, like at Copper Crossing, you could argue that we could build 24-foot clear ceilings, but we build, for the future. And so we're building buildings that are 36-foot clear, or taller, knowing that that was the trend in places where they're already landlocked in Los Angeles, and that will be the trend in Salt Lake. And so we're trying to start with the end in mind. And I think that everyone needs to keep that perspective.
There's been a good amount of discussion around green technologies and sustainability and innovation. Technology has certainly led the way through a lot of this COVID challenge, and I think it will also be leading the way through a lot of the inland port development, and to be developed in a sustainable and innovative way. I know the business plan, Jack, that I've read about the inland port talks a lot about charging stations, talks a lot about how we can cut down on HVAC, different kinds of production, air quality issues. Anything along those lines of innovation and sustainability, I know have been really key words in the business development plan. Anything about that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, and it is an important piece of the pie, and it's an important piece of the puzzle. I mean, logistics has traditionally been fairly dirty. I mean, diesel trucks and diesel cargo handling equipment and large rooftops and large paved areas create stormwater issues and things like that. It has traditionally been a dirty piece of the issue, and for a large degree hidden in a lot of times. But the world is changing, and it's changing rapidly, driven by consumer demand and driven by investor demand and driven by capital markets. We are dealing with those issues now, and the logistics industry is moving exponentially to change the way that it does its business. You see shipping lines spending billions of dollars on new green fleets. You see trucking companies spending billions of dollars to revamp their fleets and overhaul their fleets and move to zero emissions. You see cargo handling equipment manufacturers revamping their production lines to come up with near zero and zero emissions top picks, forklifts, and rubber-tired gantry cranes and things like that. It's moving very rapidly, and it's moving faster, frankly, than any sort of government agency in terms of imposing restrictions. Utah has an opportunity really to position itself as being a hub and being a home for those investments to be deployed. We are in a unique position in that so much of the inland port area on the west side of Salt Lake City is still to be built out and is still to come in the future. So we have an opportunity to insert as from a public standpoint as well as from the private sector, insert these investments in smarter as well as greener technologies that will reduce emissions, reduce impacts on critical habitat areas like the Great Salt Lake and others, reduce the air quality impacts, reduce the traffic impacts, and really do things in a way that put us in good stead for the future users that David's building buildings for. And that's where the inland port can come in to try to be that bridge that gap between those new technologies and the investments that's going to be required to be able to deploy them.
You know, one just to tag on to that a little bit, Jack. That's a great explanation. And one of the things I've been reading about also is the satellite ports, and how satellite ports will actually take truck traffic off of our roads. Traffic that is not necessary for deploying product in the local market could be redeployed to more rural satellites. How's that playing into some of the air quality issues that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of in the way that you described. I mean, we have a highly concentrated distribution system here in Utah. It's highly concentrated here in Salt Lake City. And in fact, for a city our size, we have probably the most highly concentrated warehouse distribution system in the nation. To the extent that we can identify satellite locations around the state and divert cargo to those locations and divert it away from the Wasatch Front. If it doesn't need to come here, don't bring it here. We'll improve efficiency and effectiveness of the system overall, but we'll also reduce the impacts, reduce the number of truck trips, and reduce the environmental impacts of handling that cargo right here on the Wasatch Front. And it creates economic opportunity in these other areas around the state. And that's an important piece of the puzzle, I think. So much of Utah's economic growth and development over the last 10 years or so has really been focused here in the Wasatch Front. This is an opportunity to look at where those cargo flows are going, what assets and facilities are in those areas, how can we redeploy and repurpose those things, and put the cargo where it needs to be.
This is, to me, a really important part of the overall business plan for the reasons that Jack just suggested. It's a great environmental potential improvement for this state, but also, you know, we know that the Wasatch Front has been pulling away from our rural partners, and as this sort of flywheel economy has been going, they've needed some product development to help them get back in the game. And so for me, there's so many facets of this project that are exciting, but to be able to really bring our rural partners into a statewide economic development program is something that I'm pretty jazzed about. And I appreciate so much that Jack paid attention to that from day one when he arrived here in Utah.
So the folks that we represent are owners and occupiers of industrial space from the you know, local or regional company that's distributing maybe something that's even manufactured here locally to large international companies that we're representing. Let's talk about the opportunities that all three of you see, Devin, Theresa, and Jack, for owners and occupiers of industrial real estate. A good tie-in was that we met with an occupier who's been in the distribution of janitorial supplies a couple weeks ago, and they've been here for about 35 years. They're occupying about 80,000 square feet in 2 buildings. Devin talked about the idea of a much taller clearance building to create some efficiency. This company was thinking they needed to expand to potentially 130,000 square feet. And we did some auditing of their space needs, and we were able to determine that at Copper Crossing in Devin's building, they could get that footprint down to about 80,000 square feet. So a pretty significant savings in terms of not only square footage, dollars for sure, but the impact potentially on the environment. So what kinds of opportunities we're well known for Team Utah and collaborating, people coming together. I'd love to hear from all three of you what you all think the opportunities are for owners and occupiers of industrial real estate in Salt Lake City and Utah.
Well, I think Jack kind of spoke to it, that a lot of our ground is kind of greenfield and buildings to be built. And so there's a lot of knowledge and design information that is provided now to the industry that probably wasn't there 10 years ago. And so we can start with these buildings, you know, on making the right step, the right foot forward. And, you know, like at Copper Crossing, you know, when we started the first building, we knew that electric semi trucks were in the works. They were starting to be announced. They were starting to be talked about. So one of the things that we did is we ran conduits from our power panels to back ends of our property on that lot to cover all of the truck court. So either trailer stalls, wherever, we don't know where the tractors are going to charge, but we knew that that's coming. And so we're trying to future-proof the buildings and the property so that they can have charging stations throughout, for not only for the employees, for their you know, for their normal car, but also for these semi trucks and like that. Some of the other things that we do are, you know, we put in tons of windows and other things like that, and we work on our storm drains so that they, you know, one of the things I've been working on with Salt Lake Public Utilities is design a storm drain that doesn't need maintenance. You know, they talk about having to remove weeds and natural vegetation to make sure that the storm flows. I'm like, well, why don't you design it so you don't need to do that? So these are the kind of discussions that we have on a daily basis, the problems that we try to solve with stormwater and sewer and building heights and AC and, you know, performance of mechanical equipment. So it all just translates into a building that can be occupied by people and by businesses at the lowest operating cost possible. And then I think the other thing that's magical about the inland port, and since there's so much land available, there's co-location opportunities. So like our e-commerce tenants are co-locating next to UPS. So if they were on the other side of the valley, you would imagine that all their packages would have to be ferried across the valley, you know, to all of our different suburb locations to UPS to then have their 2-day ground shipping. But at Copper Crossing, they just skip across the street and boom, it's gone. And then, you know, those packages are sent out all over the United States. And so the synergies of co-location, future building, things like that for our buildings really help.
Theresa, Jack, anything to add to owners and occupiers' opportunities as it relates to the inland port?
I think Darren summed it up well.
Yeah, and I agree with what David said. I mean, building those buildings, future-proofing those buildings, thinking down the line of what's happening is important, and that's what the Inland Port Authority is trying to bring to this whole logistics network in Utah. Looking down the line, what is happening? Where are we headed? Where are we going? What kinds of buildings and programs and policies do we want to incentivize and things like that? Going from a 24-foot clear height to a 36-foot clear height may sound real technical, things like that. But really what that does is that allows for density inside the building, increasing the cube space in the building, allows for greater density, allows you to consolidate your footprint, allows you to automate. All those things lead to improved operating cost over time. And there's an ROI to that really is important and really should go into anyone's thinking about where to locate. So that's one of the beauties of this area and this development and thinking longer term and thinking down the road.
As I thought about this a little bit more between Darren and Jack's comments, I think the only other thing I might add is just the opportunity to be in an area where there's a lot of intention behind what's going on. And I think for somebody that is risking capital, it makes that play, in my mind, a bit more secure than maybe some other communities that aren't as organized and that haven't designed and that don't have a business plan for this. So, you know, from an ROI standpoint, I think from a private business owner, this intentionality is important.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I know that improved reliability, increased efficiency, reduction in costs, as well as a real close eye on how to be smart in eliminating air pollution and heat pumps for buildings, charging stations for trucks, eliminating the number of trucks on the road, being smart about the packaging types that are used, boxing only what's needed inside the product to be shipped out. I mean, these are things that Utah is totally focused on, and I can see that that's happening here in the Inland Port and in individual development. So thank you for your leadership in those things. I think we're pretty close to wrapping up, but want to just touch on a couple little things. Is what is it that excites you the most about the Inland Port and the Northwest Quadrant? And any of you could take that. Maybe if all of you want to take a moment to share on that topic, it'd be great. How about we start with Jack?
Okay, I'll go first. I mean, what excites me about this is, as a logistician, as someone coming from the ports, it's this opportunity to sort of rethink logistics for the 21st century, rethink what, how logistics operates, what kinds of logistics we need, what kind of logistics investments we want to make, and the opportunity to sort of truly create a truly smart, innovative, intentional, to use Theresa's term, logistics system in the state is for me personally, that's really exciting and that's really interesting. And I think it's going to create opportunities and benefits that we can't even put words to yet. So,
how about Theresa?
Sure. Well, mine goes to somewhat of a personal story, but I'm Utah born and raised. I remember a lot of brain drain as I was growing up, and just the moxie of a state the size of Utah in the middle of the Intermountain West to say we want to be not only the crossroads of the Intermountain West, but we want to be the crossroads of the world. Like, to be part of something like that, to me is exciting, where we will plant a flag as the state of Utah to be one of the cornerstone developments of this now even more evolving and more quickly evolving global supply chain. I think it's pretty cool. That's something that I'm excited about. So more general, but then have the knock-on effect of that be great economic activity to try and keep Utahns here who want great employment opportunities and who want to work with their hands, or who want to be designing cool new things, who want to make stuff, to be able to do that in Utah. That's pretty special. So that's something I'm excited about.
Thank you. Devin?
For me, it's every day, it's pretty much logistics and industrial work in the Inland Port as it relates to my work at Copper Crossing. Over the last 3 years, we've acquired over 120 acres of land. So every day we're trying to solve stormwater, sewer, and water, and create sites that are ready for businesses to locate. And we want to help them grow. And we're a relationship business. And so all these business owners that we work with that, occupy space in our buildings or we sell land to, we value those relationships. And it's a lot of fun to see these businesses grow and see their successes, even in tough times. Some of my favorite experiences of COVID are hearing from some of our tenants, local Utah businesses calling me and telling me about their successes and how they've been able to manage through this crisis. And it's just been special and neat. And, it's what makes me happy. And so to work with people like that every day, and that's super fun. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Michael, do you want to answer the question, maybe take it home on the finish of the call?
Well, just like with Theresa, I mean, I've been in Utah. I feel like I'm a native. I've been there almost 30 years and doing industrial real estate in that entire time. And to see this piece of property that we have at Copper Crossing turn into part of a major, really international hub for logistics, e-commerce, we're seeing all sorts of activity, and the opportunities that we have are amazing. So we appreciate the leadership that you guys bring. We've loved working with you, Theresa, on several projects, including UPS and Stadler Rail. We've got more that we're going to be working with you on. And Jack, we look forward to your leadership with the Inland Port and what that's going to mean to us that are in business in our state. And really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll get to have some meetings with some of the audience that we're talking to with you directly, because they're going to need to do some expanding and relocating. And so we appreciate our relationship with all of you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you making the time to be here today. We're excited about prospects of this new global enterprise and how it will benefit and care for the needs of our people here in an environmentally sustainable way. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Bye.